This is an artist's impression of what they saw.
It would be an ideal location if you were trying to keep something secret and if you wanted a high level of security. It's an extremely mountainous region, it's extremely difficult to get to.
Experts say it looks like a uranium milling plant.
I'd expect that the long structure will contain a conveyor belt and large-scale industrial machinery for breaking up the rock, and which contains about 1% of the rock, which would be actual U-308 uranium ore.
Experts believe Saddam could be just 2 years away from having the necessary technology to build atomic weapons. If, as Gwyn Roberts' evidence suggests, he's planning to get the essential raw material, uranium, from the Gara Mountains, he'd then be able to ignore international restrictions.
Having a supply of uranium ore can allow you to have within your own country everything you need to develop a weapon.
Claims that Saddam is mining uranium are not new, but these pictures are the strongest evidence yet seen in public that they could be true.
Syrian forces are tonight surrounding the French embassy in Beirut, where the former leader of Lebanon's Christian rebels has been granted political asylum. Syria says the Lebanese government want to put General Aoun on trial. The general surrendered earlier today after attacks by Syrian forces. His defeat marks a turning point in Lebanon's 15-year civil war. General Aoun's Christian forces used to control East Beirut. With the help of Syria, Lebanese forces ousted Aoun, and East Beirut is now under the control of the Syrian-backed Lebanese army.
Lebanon's armed forces did not achieve victory on their own. It was Syrian firepower that made it possible. Bombing from the air and artillery from the ground directed at the presidential palace at Babda, where General Aoun has been holding out. But it is still a victory for what's widely regarded as the legitimate government of Lebanon. Led by a Christian president, but committed to giving more say to Muslim groups, it represents perhaps the best chance yet of ending Lebanon's civil war. General Aoun refused to accept it when it was formed last year and vowed to fight to the death against a regime which he claimed was under Syria's thumb. The general narrowly escaped an assassination attempt yesterday. When he finally surrendered today, he made for the French embassy. The building is now surrounded by troops. Though France has given General Aoun political asylum, the Syrians want him to stand trial. Syria's President Assad has been able to act with such confidence in part because of the Gulf crisis. Saddam Hussein supported Mr. Assad's enemies in Lebanon. His attention is now elsewhere. Today's fighting in Beirut means that President Assad is one step closer to securing his control over the city's streets. That's at a time when there are real hopes that the British hostages held there by Hezbollah may soon be released.
As Syrian control over the capital of Lebanon increases, together with that of the legitimate government, so by implication, the ability of Hezbollah to maintain control of the hostages is going to decrease. And this makes it even more certain that in the near future they're going to be released.
The downfall of General Aoun is being celebrated in both the Christian east and the Muslim west of Beirut, but the joy is not universal. There are still Christian hardliners who fear that Syria has long-term ambitions to control their country.
Israel has said it's dismayed by the United Nations condemnation of the killing of 21 Palestinians by Israeli security forces last Monday. The Israeli cabinet meets tomorrow to decide whether to allow a UN inquiry team to visit the occupied territories. In a compromise move, the UN Security Council has called for a report into the incident, but both the Palestine Liberation Organization and Iraq say that's not enough.
Israel is now a country internationally condemned, its capital Jerusalem a city in fear of Palestinian reprisal, and it's all the fault of Saddam Hussein, according to the government here. Not surprisingly, there's anger and disappointment at the UN resolution, a feeling of isolation that the rest of the world hasn't tried to understand the Israeli position. More than 20 Arabs died on Monday when police opened fire on stone throwers in the old city. The government says the incident was pre-planned by the Palestinians, who were inspired by Saddam to attack the Jews' most holy shrine.
We think that this is a one-sided resolution. It doesn't take into account completely so the provocation which preceded the tragic events, and they were tragic, and we admit that they were tragic, and everybody understands they were tragic. But a one-sided resolution can never fulfill its goal to contribute for more tranquility and peace.
There's also dismay that the country's strongest ally, the USA, has now abandoned its traditional position in vetoing condemnation of Israel, but privately, government officials here say that they don't expect it to lead to a major rift. Colin Baker, ITN, Jerusalem.
The Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd has called on Israel to negotiate a peaceful settlement with the Palestinians. Mr. Hurd visits Israel on Monday. Writing in tomorrow's Sunday Express, he says Israel has used increasingly harsh measures to impose its rule, leading to what he called dreadful bloodshed. Mr. Hurd, who's now in Egypt, also said Israel will be making a mistake if it refused to admit the UN inquiry team.
Egypt's President Mubarak led the mourners today at the funeral of his deputy, shot dead by terrorists yesterday. Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd sympathized, his government also having been the victim of terrorism. On the issue of Kuwait, he and President Mubarak agreed that opposition to Iraq's invasion should not be linked to the issue of Israel and the Palestinians. A meeting of minds here in Cairo, but on Monday Mr. Hurd visits Israel, where he'll find a less friendly reception. Visiting the Tutankhamun treasures on the eve of that visit to Jerusalem, Mr. Hurd showed no sign of using a mask of diplomacy to conceal his sympathy for the Palestinians on the West Bank.
I mean, the Palestinians in the occupied territories have no political rights. Their lands are settled, we believe illegally, by new settlers. Sometimes schools and universities are closed, and sometimes there are these fearful tragedies such as we've seen with the shootings in Jerusalem. We really cannot at this time allow it to be thought that Saddam Hussein is the only person who remembers this dispute. And I'm very glad that even before the shootings in Jerusalem, President Bush, others, including in a small way myself, made the point that there is unfinished business here, which will cause us trouble unless we tackle it.
So the pressure is increasing on Israel to negotiate with the Palestinians and to agree to take part in an international Middle East peace conference. But Mr. Hurd is unlikely to find any new sympathy for those ideas when he visits Jerusalem next week. Jeffrey Archer, ITN, Cairo.
The High Court tonight granted an injunction to stop the sale of cut-price books. The order was obtained by the publishers of this year's entrants for the Booker Prize. Discounts of up to 25% on those books became available at many bookshops this week. Now, with a look at today's sport, here is David Bobin.
Well, on a day of drama at St Andrews, England came back from a seemingly hopeless position against Japan to win a place in tomorrow's Dunhill Cup final. Earlier, Ireland had beaten New Zealand, but in the second match, it was Mark James who finally secured England's victory at the fourth extra hole.
It was an amazing day on the old course, sin at the first to set England on the way. Yet by the 17th, the Japanese were looking strong, despite Mashai's bunker problems. James looked a beaten man as his opponent tiptoed gently up the 18th, playing barefoot off tarmac, a Far Eastern speciality. But even then, the England captain managed a birdie to put the pressure back on. Then Mashai matched it. The Japanese thought they'd won. Out of 3 matches, they'd claimed 1 victory. The other 2 had been halved. But the rules foiled them. The 2 drawn games went to sudden death playoffs. Howard Clark fired in the first shot to bring England level. So it was down to James and Mashai to decide an epic encounter at the 4th extra hole. Mashai missed, and James made sure. The Japanese were speechless. England had pulled off an unlikely victory. Peter Staunton, ITN Sport, St Andrews.
With First Division football off today because of next week's European Championship match against Poland, attention was on the Second Division. Sheffield Wednesday moved top after beating Plymouth 3-0, 2 goals coming from John Sheridan. Oldham a second, Neil Redfern got the late equaliser in Oldham's 2-2 draw at Hull. Third are West Ham, who drew 1-1 with Bristol City. The Hammers' goal coming from a typical touch from Frank McAvenny. But City didn't take long to level. A corner headed on by Mark Azelwood let Nicky Morgan score against his old club. West Ham, though, still unbeaten. In Scotland, Dundee United are 2 points clear of Rangers and Aberdeen, an own goal by Willie Miller giving them victory over Hibernian. Well, for the second year running, jockey Michael Kinnan and trainer Dermot Weld won the Cartier Million at Phoenix Park in Dublin.
And over on the wide outside, El Dinero and Golden Mintage. They race inside the final furlong now. Rinkadas in the centre from Kuyanga. Golden Mintage coming home well on the near side, but it's Rinkadas as they race up towards the line. Rinkadas wins the million. Dermot Weld and Michael Kinnan.
And the result of what could be the last meeting at Phoenix Park: first Rinkadas at 7-1, second Kuyonga 9-1, and third Golden Vintage at 25-1. Good news tonight of Grand Prix driver Alessandro Nannini. Surgeons say the operation to restore his right arm following a helicopter crash looks to have been a success, but it will be some time yet before it's known if Nannini will be able to resume driving.
ITM bulletins continue throughout the night, but that's it for now. Goodbye.
Education has turned out to be Labour's big idea, but can they deliver? I'll be interviewing Jack Straw, the Shadow Education Secretary, on Sunday at 1:10 on ITV.
Good evening. Well, today's fine, warm and sunny weather gave no hint of the fact that there's swirling low pressure and gathering cloud out to the west, but you can see the cloud at least on today's cloud scan pictures. This one started this morning when there was patchy fog up in the northeast, but that's been clearing during the day. At the same time, this thicker cloud out in the west has been moving in towards us, and there will be some showery rain to come, I think, for many places overnight, but the south will probably stay generally dry. You can see all this happening on tonight's picture in more detail. At the moment, most of the showers are out in the south and west, but the band of cloud will spread across most of the country. The odd shower turning thundery in the north for a time, but there'll be hardly any rain at all in the south, and by the end of the night, most of the cloud has gone again, leaving one or two mist patches. A mild night, but quite a windy one, perhaps even gale force winds for a time in the far southwest. By tomorrow morning, it's a generally dry picture. The overnight cloud out and away in the North Sea. Quite a bit of sunshine for most of us during the morning. But during the afternoon, the cloud starts building up again, both out in the west and in the south too. There'll be showers out in the west during the afternoon, and I think towards the end of the afternoon, showery outbreaks of rain turning up in the Channel Isles and probably in southern England too, but not until, well, quite late in the day. It's not going to be quite as warm tomorrow as it was today. Tomorrow, I think, top temperature around 21, that's 70. It's more typically 16 in the far north, and that's only 61. And the wind's staying quite fresh for most of the day, so not too bad a day, generally dry.
Now the region's weather. Tonight will start fine and dry, but cloud will increase from the west later and may bring a little rain in places by dawn, although most of the region will remain dry. It'll be a generally mild night. Tomorrow some hazy sunshine is likely, although cloud will increase and thicken during the day. A few showery outbreaks of rain are possible later, with a chance of more persistent rain in the evening. It'll be warm again, with temperatures reaching the low 20s Celsius. For the summary, becoming cloudier overnight, but mainly dry. Some hazy sunshine tomorrow, perhaps rain later.
Sunday at 7:45 on Anglia. A startling twist in the Ruth Rendell mystery. Some lie and some die.
If I'd said she'd gone next door, you'd never have left me alone.
You can't imagine him married to her. She used to fill the house with flowers.
Whose wife is she, Mr. Tate? Yours?
You and me and our little fantasies.
The key to the mystery. Some lie and some die. Sunday on Anglia.
The new Peugeot 405 91 takes your breath away.
That's it. Where I was born and raised.
Well, you didn't go hungry then, did you?
Now I'm going to show you where I did my courting.
Who says romance is dead?
This is where I had my first taste of the finer side of life. McEwen's exports.
Has this place changed much?
Aye.
These days they're letting anybody in.
McEwan's Export. It's class in a glass.
Not everyone has the time to examine their overall financial situation.
Got it. I really think there's the potential for you to improve.
Hello? I'll be right there. Come on, for you to improve your pension and mortgage situation, do you? And for you to pay less tax. Really? Have you thought about that?
Well, I haven't really given it any serious consideration. Where is she? In here.
Which is why Allied Dunbar offer a completely free financial health check.
She'll be fine.
Well done.
The Allied Dunbar Financial Health Check. Fitness for your finances.
Well, baby, I'm thinking about your chocolate. Well, baby, I'm thinking about your taste. Well, baby, I'm thinking about your chocolate. Thinking about your taste.
Ever wonder if a good marriage is still possible even with a lousy sex life? Read the results of the most definitive sex survey only in today's newspaper.
Now anyone can have their very own Andrex puppy. He's just as cute and cuddly as the real thing. But the best bit is, he won't run off with your roll.
Who says you can't have beautiful hair every day?
Sometimes you need a little finesse. Sometimes you need a lot. Sometimes you need a little finesse.
The Finesse time-controlled formula, never over conditions, never under conditions. So your hair always gets perfect conditioning, and you always get perfect hair.
Sometimes you need a little finesse. Sometimes you need a lot. Finesse.
The Wheeler dealers of Capital City are back this Thursday.
Good morning, Michelle.
And after you get out of the natural hot springs, what do you do?
Yes! Oh, was that okay?
Natural hot geezers.